Hello everyone, good day. So this is your teacher Hasher A. Abdulgani who wants to discuss to you chapter 1 lesson 3 entitled Culturally Sensitive and Bias Free Language. But before anything else, let me have first my introduction. Just as important as awareness of the existence of world Englishes is that of practicing cultural sensitivity. To write in a culturally sensitive way means to be aware that cultural differences and similarities between people exist, and that these should not be assigned a positive or negative value via words and descriptions selected in writing. So here we have different type of groups or categories. Number one is race and ethnicity. The second one is gender and sexual orientation. The third one is social class. The fourth one is age. And the last one is disabilities. So let me have first discuss to you number one, which is race and ethnicity. Racism, a form of discrimination against a person or persons of a different race. So please don't forget the word race, racism, which stands for discrimination against persons of a different race. Example, we have here a sentence: naturally, the Asian students won the math contest. So if you are trying to give emphasis on the word naturally, it reinforces the stereotype or generalization that Asians have superior aptitude in math. So we should better get rid of word naturally. It is because not all the time that Asians have superior aptitude in mathematics. So here we have an image that says that they say all Chinese people look the same. The same as what? So if we are trying to give more emphasis on this image, we could say that it could somehow talks about a different race, people of China or Chinese people, right? One must be attuned to the current terminology by which racial and ethnic groups refer to themselves. So, which means if you are trying to be an effective communicator, try to be aware of those current terminologies used in specific ethnic groups. It is because there are words which are applicable and sometimes not applicable in a certain place. How we could able to achieve that? It is through by reading national newspaper and watching television news. So why is it that we have to be aware of the current terminologies? It is because English language, English words are actually uh, evolving. Okay? So what you should do? Number one is refer to a group by the term it prefers. So this means you have to be particular. If you are in a certain group, then you should have to be respectful. You should have to be able to know what words are or should be avoided, what words should be avoided and should be applied. So that is the meaning of refer to a group by the term it prefers. Be sensitive to religion when referring to various ethnic groups. Here, we could able to say that once a person is being sensitive So probably he possesses a respectful manner. Okay, be sensitive. It is because we do have varied ethnic groups. Example, here in the Philippines, we do have Christians and Muslims. So there are words which are very applicable to Christians, but somehow not applicable to Muslims. So that is why be sensitive to religion. So in what way you should have to be respectful. The second one is gender and sexual orientation. Okay, so don't forget the word sexism, the prejudice and discrimination based on sex or gender. We do have here an image states that better sexy and racy than sexiest and racist. So don't forget, if one possesses this quality, he is very particular with discriminating people based on sex or gender, then you could say that that person is possessing sexism behavior. Okay, sexism, please don't forget the prejudice and discrimination based on sex or gender. So we have here a list of words which means gender neutral words by the way. So the first one is man-made, chairman, stewardess, manpower. So if you are trying to divide the two, there are actually two type of gender who is uh, mostly emphasized. The number one is man, and then the second one is girl, man-made. It is very favorable to the part or to the size of the man. For example, man-made, right? Instead of saying man-made, you could say artificial. The second one is chairman. Instead of saying chairman, you could say chairperson. Stewardess, you could say that, but it is more preferable to use flight attendant to avoid sexism. Manpower. When I say manpower, it is actually or obviously favorable to the part and size of men. So it is better to use labor instead of using manpower. So these are example of gender neutral words. Okay, man-made is to artificial, chairman is to chairperson, stewardess is to flight attendant, manpower is to labor. Okay, and let's proceed to number 3, social class. Class discrimination or classism is a form or prejudice against a person of people because of their social class. So here, pag pogi or maganda sa internet, viral. Pero kapag pangit is virus. So that is an example of social class or class discrimination. Okay? So what are words which fall under this? More sensitive vocabulary. We do have here 3 words. Number 1 is the owning class. The owning class. The second one is the underclass. And the third one is squatters. Instead of saying the owner class, you could say the upper class. Okay? And instead of saying underclass, you could say the less privileged. And instead of saying squatters, you could say informal settlers. Right? So it is more advisable to use this word. It is because uh, it becomes more sensitive and more culturally based. So, for example, the owning class is to upper class, right? Underclass, less privilege. And I say less privilege. For example of that, in a sentence, you could say the less privileged people have been given a financial support by the government. You could say that. Instead of saying the underclass people have been given a financial support by the government. Okay? So it is more favorable to use this word than on the left side, the owning class, the underclass, and the squatter. Okay? So let's proceed to number 5. Number 5 is age. Ageism, a form of discrimination against other people because of their age, or assuming that older people are less physically, intellectually, or emotionally able than the other age groups. So here, for example, we do have older persons and young people. That is why here in the Philippines, the government uses senior citizens, not older persons. Okay? Young people, you could say teenagers. Okay? It is nicer to hear, and of course more advisable to use. It is because if you're trying to use older persons, it could somehow make discrimination against the other people who are old, right? Let's proceed to number 6. Here, disabilities. When referring to people with disabilities, the focus should be on the person, not the condition. Okay? Said by Arenzo 2009. Okay, so we have here avoid hurtful expressions such as retards, the mentally retarded, the blind, and cancer patients. Okay, so avoid using that because it somehow create discrimination to those people with disabilities. Instead of using that, you could say for retards or mentally retarded, you could say the people with mental retardations. It sounds good and it sounds better, right? Instead of saying blind or the blind, you could say people with vision impairments. It is nice. It is nicer to hear, okay? And the last one is for cancer patients, you could use people being treated for cancer. Okay? So there is an example here. Okay. Example, the blind student used a special keyboard during the exam. Instead of saying that, you could say the student, okay, the student who is visually impaired use a special keyboard during the exam. So why is it that there is a comma here? It is because it separates the meaning. The student, okay, the phrase who is visually impaired is actually a dependent clause, okay, is an independent clause of the student. And the verb of the student is use. The student use a special keyboard during the exam. Since we are trying to give more, what you call this, to talk about the quality of the student, so you could say the student who is visually impaired. Okay, an adjective. Instead of saying the blind student, you could say the student who is visually impaired. Okay. Lastly, according to the American Psychological Association, writers should be specific when referring to males and females in terms of their age. Okay, so this is another actually. So females, females 18 years or older are women and not girls. Okay, so if the female is already 18 years old or above 18 years old, then you could able to use the word woman if it is singular, but if they are plural, then you can use women. Okay, women and not girls. Okay, because girls refer to those in high school or younger under 18. Let's say under 18 starts from 17, 16, 15, and the rest of the number. Okay, the rest under 18. The same is true for boys and man. When I say 18 years old for boys, and that is already man. Okay, so please don't forget that because that is additional knowledge. Okay, when it comes to writing. Okay, final takeaway: to be an effective writer, one must not stereotype, demean, or exclude any member of his or her audience. When I say one must not stereotype, it should not possess being ageism, classism, uh, talks about disabilities, okay? Demean or exclude any member of his or her audience. Such stereotypes and biases are barriers to communication. It is because it could somehow create conflict and at the same time misunderstanding. So that is why it became a barrier to communication. Anyone who wishes to maintain harmonious communicative relations should be careful in using words and phrases that do not discriminate against particular groups, whether in terms of race, okay, racism, ethnicity, gender, social class, age, and disability. Okay, so I hope you learned something today, and I also keep emphasize or emphasis to the disclaimer. The first one is a PowerPoint presentation of Isabel Soriano. Okay, so where this presentation is actually derived from, and to the one that I am using right now, the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so thank you very much for listening, and God bless us all. Thank you. Goodbye.